Okay, we are recording this session just really so we can go back and reference some of the comments that you folks have. Now I will be sharing my screen and beginning. All right. So once more, thank you again for attending this listening session for the City of Newburyport's Hazard Mitigation Plan update of 2022. My name is Cece Gerstenbacher. I'm with the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission, and I'm going to give you a nice brief overview of the 150-something page Hazard Mitigation Plan document. So here we go. So the City of Newburyport has a FEMA, or Federal Emergency Management Agency approved hazard mitigation plan, which has been around for a number of years and must be updated every 5 years. Newburyport's last hazard mitigation plan was created in 2016 and is thus now in need of an update reflecting the last 5 or so years, both to be relevant and an accurate plan to assist the City of Newburyport with long-term planning, but also, as Andrew mentioned, to allow Newburyport to be eligible for certain FEMA funds to assist with these hazard mitigation plan actions. As you can see in the lower right-hand corner, this process consists of 6 components. First is the planning process, which refers to the convening of a core team and collaboration with local and regional stakeholders, which then work together to complete steps 2 and 3, the identification of hazards and assessment of risks, and creating strategies to help reduce these hazards. This process has been completed, and we now have a new final draft of Newburyport's hazard mitigation plan, updated from the 2016 version, which incorporates new hazards and risks and new strategies to reduce these hazards. We are on to step 4, reviewing, evaluation, and implementation, and this listening session is part of that review to gain public insights on the contents of the plan and any locations for improvements. This plan fits into a much larger framework of risk assessment plans and large plans for the City of Newburyport, including or building off of the Great Marsh Coastal Adaptation Plan of 2014, Newburyport's Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Workshop of 2018, the Climate Resiliency Plan of 2020, and the Old Merrimack Valley Hazard Mitigation Plan of 2016. So why should we be planning for these events? I am sure many of us can think back to a time where our lives were impeded by some form of natural disaster, blizzards closing down roads and knocking out power, flooding preventing access to certain locations, and potentially causing property damage. As a coastal Massachusetts community, several of threats of this nature exist, as well as more national and global threats like climate change. This plan is the city's ability to identify and prioritize these hazards that impact Newburyport. The plan goes through hazards, identifies what and how they can be mitigated, and then outlines some mitigation goals and projects to reduce loss and return to normal operations as soon as possible after a hazardous event. It's a tool to develop these mitigation strategies, in turn protecting citizens from future natural hazards. And you can see just a couple of the hazards that have impacted Newburyport over the last couple of years, primarily flooding and large winter storms, which is pretty standard around here in northern Massachusetts. So taking all of that into consideration, Newburyport has developed the following overarching goals and sub-goals for their updated hazard mitigation plan. The main goal of the plan is to reduce the loss of or damage to life, property, infrastructure, and natural, cultural, and economic resources from natural disasters. Under that goal lies the following sub-goals: to develop and implement adaptation strategies and integrate climate resiliency and mitigation into community plans and policies, to integrate hazard mitigation planning into existing local policies, to ensure future development meets standards to reduce and prevent the impacts of natural hazards, to increase Newburyport's financial capability to implement hazard mitigation measures, to increase the general public's awareness of natural hazard risks, and to improve the breadth and quality of data for conducting hazard risk assessments. These goals are present throughout the plan and help guide its creation. Now, aligned with these goals and the overarching planning process, Newburyport completed a natural hazards risk assessment to identify the most pressing hazards for the city. Data to support this assessment was acquired from sources including NOAA, the National Weather Service, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and the Department of Conservation and Recreation. Results identified flooding, winter storms, and Noreasters as the most severe threats to Newburyport, which I'm sure is not a surprise to many of us, and with severe thunderstorms and extreme temperatures following soon after. Many other natural hazards were identified as potential threats to Newburyport, though less severe than those in red. You can see there is a yellow and blue category as well. So let's take a quicker, deep look into some of the most severe threats facing Newburyport to understand why they've gained this top rank. The top vulnerability for Newburyport is coastal flooding. This map to the right shows the extent of flooding that Newburyport faces during different categories of hurricanes. Even the least severe hurricanes threaten much of Plum Island and Joppa Flats to the National Grid substation. Under more extreme circumstances, surface water reservoirs, access to major roads, and the business park are all at risk. Not to mention that with predicted increases in sea level rise, the concern for coastal flooding is only going to increase. Next up, we've got nor'easters. Between 2015 and 2020 alone, we've had 12 nor'easters labeled as at least notable in their impact, with one, the January 2016 United States blizzard, even reaching the top 4 of all time, leaving pretty crippling impacts. Thinking back to this past winter alone, we've certainly had our fair share of winter storms in the form of nor'easters. Particularly, I can remember the end of January. Brought some pretty severe snowfall. I wasn't able to leave my home for a couple days. These events also bring strong winds, high waves causing coastal erosion, and coastal flooding potentially resulting in issues like widespread utility failure. Finally, a bit of an offshoot from nor'easters, we've got winter storms. Newburyport is in the mid-altitudes of the Northern Hemisphere, which, as you can see in the lower 2 panels of this figure to the right, has seen an increase in intensity and frequency of winter storms over the last 70 years. With these attributes only expected to increase as climate change brings about more frequent and severe weather events. This data, as well as the data on all of the other hazards, has played a really key role in assessing Newburyport's hazard risks in the year of 2022. Now, Newburyport is far from helpless in protecting itself from these vulnerabilities. It actually has many strengths and assets available to assist with mitigation. The next step in the plan was to identify several of these assets. The core team found the following strengths and assets for the city of Newburyport. Their updated and effective legislation surrounding wetlands, stormwater management, and zoning. Their master plan, which provides guidance for community growth and preservation of open space and natural resources. The local open space and recreation plan. The city's participation in National Flood Insurance Program. An enforced building code ensuring building safety. A GIS, or Geographic Information System, inventory, which allows for analyses like seeing how many buildings are within the floodplain at a given location, and regional shelters, which provide portable generators in case of emergencies. Given the current strengths and assets, as well as the community's largest vulnerabilities, the core team worked to identify many priority actions for Newburyport. Now, there are over 20 of these priority actions, and if you're interested in the full list with details, I highly recommend checking out the hazard mitigation plan if you haven't done so already. But for now, given saving a bit of time, I'm just going to identify a few of the key actions that we intend to work towards. Under structural actions, the raising of the Lower Artichoke Dam is essential to protect drinking water against coastal flooding. Similarly, putting up berms surrounding the wastewater treatment plant is also necessary to protect that asset from coastal flooding. And in light of the threat that coastal flooding holds over the drinking water supply in Newburyport, it's also necessary to procure backup drinking water supply from neighboring communities until the Lower Artichoke Dam is properly raised. Under prevention, Newburyport looks to revise zoning and building regulations to improve resiliency and discourage development in high hazard flood zones. Under public awareness, Newburyport intends to develop a task force to address some of the issues surrounding Plum Island and implement an automated water quality monitoring system to protect residents from health risks associated with combined sewage overflow events. The combined sewage overflow events is actually a project that Newburyport has partnered with MVPC on, and the results to that currently exist on MVPC's website as a dashboard showing water quality in Newburyport at the mouth of the Merrimack River. Now, as I mentioned, this is not the first iteration of Newburyport's hazard mitigation plan, and part of the plan update is to share what has been accomplished since last plan. The last hazard mitigation plan developed in 2016 had similar priority actions, many of which Newburyport did accomplish. Since 2016, guided by this hazard mitigation plan, Newburyport raised the road on Park Run, Scotland to prevent flooding, developed an effective wetland protection ordinance, conducted a study to see how they can best protect the wastewater treatment plant from flooding, which is now being used to put up berms around the wastewater treatment plant, renovated the DPS facility, replaced fire hydrants and piping valves, and installed T1 hardware communications in the DPS facility and PETA Hall. All of these accomplishments were priority actions in the 2016 plan, and I really do look forward to coming back in 5 years and listing all the priority actions that are accomplished from the 2022 plan. So now that we have convened our core group, planned and orchestrated an update to the hazard mitigation plan, and conducted this listening session, I wanted to touch on some of the next steps of this process, which Julia touched on a little bit as well. First, we're gonna work to incorporate feedback from this listening session into the plan and then submit it to MEMA, or the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency, for review. We will then incorporate their feedback and submit it to FEMA. From FEMA, we should receive a circumstantial approval pending the approval of the City Council of Newburyport. We will then present the plan to the City Council, and pending their approval, we will submit it to FEMA and receive final approval for the plan. The plan will then be in place, allowing Newburyport to begin tackling priority actions and going after the FEMA available funds to do so. So with that, I will leave it there, and in turn, thank you for listening to this brief overview, and thank you to Julia and Andrew, as well as the rest of the core team, for your great work with this plan's development. I am going to turn it over to a couple polling questions, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then reshare it in order to facilitate some comments and some feedback, and then we're going to open up the floor to some of your thoughts. So let me stop my share. All right.
And if you feel that Julia and Cece have done such a great job with the plan that there's nothing to add, that's fine too. But if you feel there's any hazards that may be missing, or areas of mitigation that we might be able to do that you think we should include, just let us know. Sorry, sort of last opportunity for this particular round of the plan. These plans are updated periodically, but if you feel there's something missing, let us know.
Agreed. We are always looking to get the insights of the folks who live and experience the hazards of Newburyport in their everyday lives. So I just dropped in the chat a link to the poll everywhere that I'm gonna be popping up on the screen. If you click on that link, if you're on your computer, are we seeing anything here? Okay. Let's see. There we go. Seeing stuff, Andrew?
Yeah, and CC, just so you know, I don't know if folks may have to copy and paste from your message.
Yeah.
It didn't, for some reason, come across as a hyperlink,
really?
but it may be because the HTTP isn't in there or something. But if folks want to just copy the polleverywhere.com link that you included, you could fill out the survey here, and it'll help to populate the screen that CC's got up to let us know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, and we're definitely also just curious. This first question is, what is your affiliation role with the city of Newburyport? We're also just really curious, who are you? Why are you here? Getting a feel for what the folks are in the room. I recognize quite a few of your names, but it's great to just see the general breadth of folks that we've got in the room today. And we've got a couple questions after. If you're on a phone as well, you can do the old text Merrimack Val 427 to 22333. But I think the computer link works a little bit better. It's really great to see that we've got quite a few residents in the room today. I think that's pretty exciting. This is a public listening session, so that's really the intention. We want to have your residential input as citizens of Newburyport. All right. Very great. Glad to see we've got a pretty nice array with lots of residents here today. I'm gonna hop over to the next question. Just wondering if you have read or reviewed the Newburyport's hazard mitigation plan. I will definitely acknowledge if you have read the entire plan, kudos to you, because it is a hefty document. So that is a feat right there in and of itself. But it's got some great contents to it. And we're going to be incorporating these poll responses. I believe we incorporate them into the hazard mitigation plan itself, which is pretty cool. So we'll get to see, or FEMA and MEMA will get to see some of these poll responses and some of the interactions we've had via this listening session. Pretty good array there. If you haven't, yeah, I would have to start just answering Mark's question really quick. Will there be a recording of this meeting available? I'll certainly have a recording. Andrew and Julia, are you open to posting that on the city website or making that available? I'm certainly happy to make it available.
Yes, absolutely. And I need to
Great.
apologize because the link to this meeting on the city's calendar was the wrong link. It was our monthly resiliency committee meeting
Okay.
link, which is what this meeting is taking the place of today. The actual link to this session was in the invitation and on the agenda that was posted, but there was inconsistency between those two. So I apologize for that. So we absolutely will post the recording on the city's website. So anyone who missed it or missed the beginning part of it can listen to the presentation and see the slides that you presented.
Awesome. Thank you, Julia. And I'll share out that recording with you as soon as I've got it. All right, to the next question. For those of you who have at least read a bit of the Newburyport hazard mitigation plan or have really taken a deep dive and read all of it, just wondering about some overall opinions on what you think about it. Very nice to see that most of you who have read the plan believe that it captures the priority actions. And for those of you who are still reviewing the plan, not a problem. Take your time. And I mean, we will be submitting this to MEMA sometime in the next, hopefully, week or so, I believe, you know. So let us know. You're welcome to email me or Julia or Andrew some of your input that you have following your review of the plan.
Sorry, did you want us to speak to that?
Oh, no.
Okay.
If you feel like you want to, you're welcome to. I was just making some talk while folks answer, but it seems like for the most part, the folks that have read the plan think the plan captures priority actions to address Newburyport's vulnerabilities. So that's great to hear. And the final question I've got is just if there is an action you believe should be a higher priority, you're welcome to identify it here. And then we'll certainly take that into consideration. But considering the majority of you think that the plan pretty much covers all the bases, that is quite all right if you have nothing to input into this section. I'll just give it a minute or two. Then we'll open the floor to any comments that you might have. Whoa, this shows up kind of funny. I wasn't expecting it to show up as like a word puzzle. What I'm getting out of this smush of words is coastal flooding, which is really a huge action or priority action that we're hoping to address out of the hazard mitigation plan. I think flooding, sea, coastal level rise. Oh, cool. Oh, wow. Lots of stuff are coming in here.
And while that's coming in, Cece, do you mind, could you just clarify, Council Wright had just asked about when the recording of this meeting would be available. I'm assuming we might be able to post that tomorrow along with the slides, or?
Yeah, for sure. Yes. Right after this meeting, I'll download the recording and send it out to you and Julie. I'll send out the most recent version of the slides to you as well. I think they're the same as the ones I shared out previously, but I'll just double check. And you're welcome to share it out directly after that.
Sure,
This is
and
pretty
just for
cool.
clarification, typically what Julie and I will do is we'll just work with Diana in our office to have that posted to the city's website. So what we might do is just from this particular calendar posting, put a link to the recording, and that way you can go right back to the calendar, go right from there to the recording to watch this or to see the slides again.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. All right, this is a pretty cool effect that we've got going on here. I wasn't expecting it to show up in this sort of word puzzly way, but it seems like coastal flooding and Plum Island are really some of the big hitters on the actions that folks believe should be a priority. And I think that we're probably at, most people have submitted their inputs here. So I am going to stop share on this part, and then we can just open it up to a little bit more of an informal chat if you're ready for that, Andrew.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. And can I ask Cece, just for our purposes now, I guess going forward, for this particular piece right here, I know that I've seen these sort of word jumbles before, sort of a nice way of displaying things. I'm wondering, and I'm granted that's probably, some from the app. I'm just wondering, is there a way to, for this particular slide, the results of that, when we're displaying this, to get that in sort of a bullet form of what people had said?
Yeah,
just for,
I'm pretty
okay.
positive there is. Yeah,
Okay.
I'll look into it, but yeah, it's a nice way to view it, but some of it's a little bit mumbly jumble in there. So I would like to view it as bullets as well.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so to Cece's point, we want to open it up in a sort of in addition to the sort of standard survey questions, to kind of get some input on a few key areas or format questions. Open the floor. Anybody who wants to suggest something that you feel like is missing, whether or not you've reviewed the plan in full or not, anything that you think you think we should put greater emphasis on, or that should be emphasized, or that deserves mention of some type, just let us know. We're happy to take that into account.
Yeah, and if you're welcome to throw your comment in the chat. I believe I can also permit attendees to talk if you raise your hand. So either way, whatever's more comfortable for you. And if there's,
we do see one.
Oh, hi, Kristen.
You talk a little bit more about looking into the action item related to looking into backup water supply from abutting communities. And then the question is, doesn't Newburyport already supply some water to Newbury? So yeah, I guess I'll obviously Julia and Cece, feel free to speak to this too. But so we not only share, we share water and sewer on the island, of course, but we also share with West Newbury. Yes, we do have multiple communities hooked up to public services here that the city's providing. And we have been talking about backup, sort of our emergency water supply should something happen with the reservoir or otherwise impact our water supply. So those are efforts we're making on a go-forward basis to cover the capacity that we're already providing, not only to Newburyport, but also to the adjacent communities where we're sharing with West Newbury and Newbury. So it's definitely a true statement to say that we share those resources and that we should be working with the adjacent communities as we are trying to do. And I know our city engineer, John Eric White, who I don't think is with us at the moment, but he's been working hard on some of the analysis, early design work associated with, and we're trying to get into our capital improvement program on a phased approach. Appropriate connections to adjacent communities so we can provide emergency backup coverage if need be, recognizing that we not only serve the population of Newburyport, but also some of the adjacent communities too. I don't know if Julia wants to add anything to that, or if Cece wants to.
I think you covered it, Andy. Thank you.
And just for clarification, the potential for sea level rise to impact or back up into the water supply essentially is one area we've been looking at in particular. So trying to have protective measures there to make sure that there's not a backflow of water that might cause a problem to our water supply is an area that we're specifically looking at in that location. And like I said, working with adjacent communities like Amesbury or, across the river to cover a backup situation should we need one down the road for any reason.
In addition, we're working on a water supply protection plan, sort of watershed protection focused, so that even if we can't find additional sources of water in the future, we can enhance and improve, protect our own sources long-term through watershed protection activities.
Yeah, thank you, Julia, for mentioning that, because I forgot, I should have probably mentioned as well, as part of that, we have been talking, trying to pick up a little bit more discussion with the town of West Newbury, for instance, because our water supply is really, for the multiple communities is coming from there for the large part, that we work together, not only in terms of land acquisition or conservation restrictions around the water supply, but also things like, I'll look at it through my lens as a land use regulation, what types of uses or activities we're allowing around the water supply that may impact the quality of the water supply. So for instance, agricultural operations or farming, cattle and so forth can have an impact on the water supply depending on how close they're getting to the water supply, what's getting into the water supply. So we have to work in a coordinated fashion across these, quote unquote, arbitrary town lines, the sort of lines that go not according to watershed, but according to municipal boundaries. We have to work together with adjacent communities to look at land use regulations, who controls the land around the water supply, because those can have an impact on the quality of the water supply, not just do we have a backup, but how well is that working on a go-forward basis. And one thing that we are trying to look at in this coming year is a little bit more on the city's overall capacity, right? So, there's the hazard mitigation part of this, but there's also just recognizing that there's a certain finite limit to the amount of water we can provide. So we have to back into that and think about where is the new growth happening, and where do we want to target that new growth versus assuming that it might be, an infinite or indefinite growth. That realistically is not possible. Every community, every region, whether it's the nation, little communities, or globally, there is a finite amount of resources. So we have to think also about capacity as part of that. I don't see any other questions at this time. I definitely think the presentation, CC, was great. I definitely thank both of you, Julia and CC, for your hard work on the plan and helping us get to the point where we've got a final draft where we can route that for another review and then obviously get into the state. And most importantly, if you don't care about these other issues, at least you might care about the fact that it leverages some outside funds to deal with these local issues. And that is as important to us as the long range planning from a financial perspective.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrew, and the city of Newburyport for going after this endeavor. I know that it's been kind of a long time coming to get this more regional hazard mitigation plan up and running, which if you're visiting from a neighboring community to the city of Newburyport, the regional hazard mitigation plan creation should be starting probably in the next several weeks to month. But it's a very long process. And as Andrew mentioned, to be eligible for these FEMA funds, you need to have an updated hazard mitigation plan every 5 years. So I really do kudos to the city of Newburyport for going out of their way on this endeavor to produce their own hazard mitigation plan and make sure that they're set up properly for the FEMA funds. And I'm happy to be part of that process.
And thank you too. As you pointed out, we have worked with the MVPC, the Regional Planning Agency, on both the Affordable Housing Plan and hazard mitigation plans previously. And working on a regional basis, there's a lot of efficiency to doing that, a lot of consistency and coordination. It's really good. In our case, we had talked with MVPC and CC and Gerard and the others there were very helpful in recognizing that we needed to expedite our end of the plan update here a little bit faster track than others. We quite frankly have the same situation with the housing plan where we need to update that. And it may be something we need to do a little bit faster than the regional effort that is happening. But we love and very much appreciate working with MVPC because working with those regional resources, we're covering a lot of the same ground, a lot of same issues between these communities. And there is overlap for things like water supply. So being able to coordinate together and being able to take a plan update out of cycle a little bit to address Newburyport's more timely concerns is really great and helpful to us. We have been looking into for the folks related to Plum Island or elsewhere. We have been looking into outside grant funding sources. And it's important for us to have that plan up to date so that when we apply for those grants, they're looking down the checklist and they're saying, is your plan up to date? You know, that's a mandatory provision for some of these programs. So we have to be able to show that and also be able to point to in the plan, in some cases, you know, where that specific issue or vulnerability was, as well as the action that we might take to mitigate it. So, so for us, it's very helpful that MVPC has been able to help us, you know, get on the fast track and updating the plan. So thank you.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. I agree. Thank you so much, MVPC, for helping with this. Your help's been invaluable in putting together our own plan coming from the regional plan. And I also want to thank the members of, we had a small sort of internal and sort of partially external committee who worked really closely on getting this draft put together with MVPC over the past 6 months, year. And so I want to thank them as well, because their help was also invaluable. And I think we've got a great plan, and hopefully MEMA and FEMA will agree and get this thing approved as quickly as possible.
Agreed. I think the plan is in fantastic shape. I'm really excited to move forward with the submission to MEMA. I'm very, very grateful for all of you listening session attendees to make, you know, that process possible. This is a pivotal and very important step prior to the submission to MEMA. So I'm glad to see it in the rearview mirror, as much as I enjoyed planning it and facilitating it. And we're going to be moving on to submitting it to MEMA, pending some of the incorporation of the comments we've heard here today. So with that, I think unless either of you have any last comments, I will pause the recording. And once again, thank you all for your attendance and participation today.
Thanks everybody for attending.